All right, everybody, good afternoon. And since we're taking a little bit of a break from the rookie evaluation videos, we're going to get back on those, I believe, tomorrow. Figured I'd go ahead and take this opportunity to address this because there's a lot of discussion about this in the Seahawks community. I've seen some of it in my comments, I've seen some of it in my Discord, people talking about this. So I wanted to address this a little bit. And first of all, let me be very clear here. What is being said by this particular NFL writer is not something that is being repeated by a lot of different credible sources. This is a John Frisella, someone who, off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with. I don't know what his credibility is. I don't know what his sources are. I don't know what his track record is of getting things right or having the right scoops or anything like that. He's not somebody that I'm personally familiar with. He's got a blue check on X, so he's at least that good, I guess. But as I personally know from experience, it's not that hard to get the blue check these days. So I don't know what this guy's credibility is, but he tweeted this out, I believe it was yesterday, and it got some people talking, it got some people buzzing, and it's provoked a little bit of a conversation concerning Geno Smith and Sam Howell. So, tweet goes, Seattle Seahawks starting quarterback Geno Smith is on shakier ground than people realize, according to West Coast source. Seahawks front office believes they got a steal in the Sam Howell trade, and they are astonished at how productive he was despite a dysfunctional situation in Washington. My source compared the Seattle situation to the Pittsburgh Steelers. If Russ falters, you know Fields is going to be in there, he said. Which you had that, and then you also had this from NFL Rumors, which this is a very pure, just throw random stuff at the wall account. To be clear, this is one of those accounts that I frequently get asked, like, what do you think about this thing that NFL Rumors said? And I think they're under the impression that NFL Rumors is credible in a way that they are clearly not. In my experience, NFL Rumors is about the least credible account out there that attempts to be credible. They basically just throw a bunch of garbage out and they hope that 10% of it ends up being accurate. And the people who see that 10% are going to think that they're something reliable. But the reality is the other 90% tells you that they're just kind of chucking stuff up there for clicks. So NFL Rumors repeated it. Many people think Seattle Seahawks Sam Howell could take over the starting job from Geno Smith this season. So that's made some rounds. That possibility, that story, that rumor. Geno Smith actually replied to it. He replied to the original Frisella tweet. You just made this BS up. Media is full of liars. It's so crazy. So he doesn't appreciate it, and he probably shouldn't, especially if it is made up. Although I will say, Geno, you don't have to reply to every little thing out there. You don't have to give it an additional spotlight by retweeting it. You don't have to give it credibility by putting it out there in front of a bigger audience than it already was in front of. Like, you can just go out there and let your play do the talking. I don't know if you need to be replying to it, but it is the off season. He's got nothing better to do, and I get it. You know, I understand that this stuff is probably very annoying to him. Putting myself in the shoes of Geno Smith, a guy who, in my estimation, has played very well for the last couple years. He can't seem to get very much respect from his fan base. The huge chunks of this fan base don't like him and want him gone. The NFL as a whole doesn't seem to understand what he's been doing over the last couple years. He's frequently disrespected whenever there are like national rankings of quarterbacks and stuff like that. And then you have stuff like this, which you've got people trying to be credible. And again, I want to stress this. There's a huge difference between a guy like John Frisella and Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter. I'm not saying this is coming from a credible source, but you have people trying to be credible, trying to, at the very least, be realistic, saying things like this. Like, you don't really see stuff like this for other quarterbacks that are not elite. Like, of course, you don't see this with the best quarterbacks, like Patrick Mahomes. You don't see this with quarterbacks like Josh Allen. But you also don't see it with other good quarterbacks. Like, you don't see anybody throwing a rumor out there that Jordan Love might lose his starting job, or that CJ Stroud might lose his starting job, or that Matt Stafford might lose his starting job, or Dak Prescott, or whatever other quarterback you want to put into that tier. You don't see a bunch of stuff out there about how, oh, this guy's on shaky ground. And Geno Smith is probably sitting there thinking, I've played at a level commensurate with a lot of those guys over the last couple years, and I have to deal with this. I get the frustration. I would definitely caution him against replying to every little bit of it and giving it more attention than it needs to be given. But that being said, while I do think that this tweet is probably just made up, and this tweet is obviously made up because of the source, it's basically Baker Breadman tier, let's talk for a second. Because I'm thinking about Mike Macdonald here. And, well, first of all, let me just say that Mike Macdonald actually went on NFL Total Access, I think this was 2 days ago, and spoke very positively about Geno Smith. And this is notable because during this offseason, both Mike Macdonald and John Schneider seemed to basically avoid the Geno Smith topic completely. They kind of just next questioned almost everything about Geno. They didn't say anything too good about him. They didn't say anything bad about him. They were just like, yeah, Geno's here. And there wasn't a vote of confidence verbally from the team. And a lot of people read into that as they don't want to keep Geno, and he's going to be gone, and we're going to get another quarterback. And now that the draft is over and it's basically been guaranteed that Geno's going to be the guy, you are starting to see guys like Mike Macdonald start to be a little more public in their praise of him. So I do find that interesting. I don't know exactly what the plan there may have been. Maybe they were looking to trade him at one point, but they wanted some big haul that they weren't going to get. Maybe they were just messing around because they like to play with the media, which if I was in that position, I would want to do that too. Who wants to work with the media? Who likes the media? Nobody likes the media, right? But I'm thinking about Mike Macdonald here. This is our first year with this new coach after having Pete Carroll for so long. And I'm thinking about the coach that we had before Pete Carroll. I'm not counting Jim Mora Jr. He was only here 1 year. I'm talking about Mike Holmgren. And I'm thinking about the way he did things. So when Mike Holmgren was here pretty early on, not immediately, but early in Mike Holmgren's tenure as the Seahawks head coach, we had Matt Hasselbeck and we had Trent Dilfer. And I remember, and other people remember this too, Matt Hasselbeck was the starter. It was his job. He would start the games. He was the guy. He was the quarterback. And he was, early on, expected to be the franchise quarterback. He wasn't expected to be, a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady, but he was expected to be a good starting quarterback who you could win with. Kind of like what Geno Smith is now, really, when you think about it. And the way Mike Holmgren did things, because he did this multiple times, is that if he saw things from Matt that he didn't like in a particular game, a particular week, he'd just pull him. He would just pull him and put Trent Dilfer out there. And Trent Dilfer was at that point an established NFL veteran who, while there was a little bit of a lower ceiling there, Holmgren knew he could trust Dilfer to play within his offense, do his job, and not get too carried away. So Hasselbeck, who was clearly at that point more talented and had more upside than Trent Dilfer, he would he would occasionally just kind of slide off the path. He would occasionally just forget the fundamentals of the Holmgren offense. He would lose track of the West Coast offense, and he would start making mistakes. He would start doing the Brett Favre stuff, the bad Brett Favre stuff. And Holmgren wasn't having it. He would just be like, okay, you're sitting down for the rest of this game. Trent's going to go in, and we're going to try to win this game with Trent Dilfer. I think there were a couple of circumstances where Dilfer actually got a start. And it wasn't because Hasselbeck was hurt. It wasn't because of anything like that. It was just, he's not playing well right now. I'm going to get him out, and I'm going to teach him, look, if you don't do your job, if you don't play within the offense, if you don't do things the way they're meant to be done, you don't get to play. And this happened at least a couple of times that I remember. And eventually, I'd say starting around maybe 2003, Hasselbeck started to play within Holmgren's offense consistently well enough to maintain his job, and that stopped happening. And then you go to a Pete Carroll, who, for most of his tenure as the Seahawks head coach, had Russell Wilson as his quarterback. And obviously, Russell Wilson was a more high profile quarterback than Matt Hasselbeck. So I understand that the context is a little different. But the way Pete Carroll would do things is that he would just let it ride. And there were times, because believe me, even during Russell Wilson's prime, there were games where it felt like Russell Wilson just decided he wasn't going to show up. He wasn't going to do anything. It looked like sometimes he chugged a bottle of NyQuil right before the game started. That's the best way I can put it. He would just drop back in the pocket, stand there, pat the ball, pat the ball, pat the ball until he got sacked. Or it was almost like, I remember 2017. 2017 was a year where Russell Wilson led the league in total touchdowns, I think. But pretty much every first quarter, he didn't do anything. He didn't really start doing stuff until the second quarter in a lot of those games. And it was just this really bizarre thing because we know how good he can be because we see him be really good in the fourth, usually in the third, sometimes in the second. As the game goes on, he heats up. But it's just like he's completely mentally out of it in that first quarter. There were other seasons as well where that felt like that was the case. There were games where he just wasn't there. And it wasn't just a matter of, oh, he's not playing well. It's like he's mentally not there. But Pete would never bench him. Because that's not the way that Pete Carroll chose to do things with his players. Pete Carroll wanted the player to work through it on their own, and hopefully they would work through it in time for them to win the game. But if not, then they lose. And they'll get it next time. So I'm thinking about that. And then I think about the way Holmgren did it, which, as I said, was different. Could Mike Macdonald maybe look at this in the way that Holmgren did? Could he look at a situation where, all right, Geno Smith is the starter, but we have this Sam Howell guy who is young and cheap, and we kind of like him. We traded for him. And if Geno's not feeling it, then he doesn't get to play. And if Geno, not just playing bad, because everybody plays bad every now and then, but if Geno just isn't there, if Geno's making really, really low football IQ mistakes, like I'm thinking against Washington last year, at the end of the half, when he commits a really, really bad intentional grounding call to cost us a field goal attempt at the buzzer of the first half, which ended up being potentially very important in that game because we only won it by a last-second field goal. So stuff like that I'm talking more about. Just not going through reads the right way, making idiotic decisions. Could Mike Macdonald be the kind of coach, and I would throw Ryan Grubb in there as well because he's running the offense, could this be a situation where, yeah, there is a shorter leash, and if you're not there mentally, if you're not in the game, if your head's not in the right place, you will potentially get benched? Yeah, I could see Mike Macdonald being more of that kind of guy. So, yeah, I think there is some room for a guy like a Sam Howell to get snaps if Geno's just not particularly feeling it one week. But I don't think it'll be anything permanent. I don't think that Geno's going to struggle a little bit at the start of the season, and then the team just decides we're pulling the plug. Sam Howell's now your full-time starter. I think it would be more of a thing like we're going to sit Geno down to get his mind right because we know what he can do. We know what he's been capable of doing for extended stretches over the last couple seasons. And as for this part from the Frisella tweet about how productive he was despite a dysfunctional situation in Washington, as far as I'm concerned, Seattle's offensive line was much worse than it was in Washington last year. Geno does probably have better receivers, but I really don't think that if you were to compare situations, yes, Washington as an organization is probably dysfunctional, but if you're just looking at what the teams surround the quarterback with, really don't think there's a big difference there between what Howell dealt with and what Geno dealt with. If anything, Howell probably had it a little bit better because he had a real offensive line. But we're going to need to actually build a real offensive line this year for that to even matter. All right, let me know what you guys think, if anything. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks.